How do ants find food? Ants forage. They set out to find food for the day without any idea where the food might be located. Yet, once a foraging ant runs into a food source, it will consume some of it and then return to the colony. While making its way back, it leaves a trail of pheromones. Other ants pick up on the trail and they follow it to the food source. This in turn creates a pheromone trail that's incredibly intense, leading to more ants following the same path. Suddenly, you have an invasion of ants simply because they are following the strongest signal. When we start learning a language, we too look for the strongest signal. Except most language learning often leads us down the wrong trail and frustrates us. We start, stop, start again, get lost a lot, and then we decide we're hopeless at the task. Maybe, yes, maybe, if we had learned languages as kids, we'd have been better off. And you'd be right, because kids don't learn like adults do. Kids approach language learning in a manner that's remarkably different from adults. No kid can be bothered with vocabulary. Grammar? What's that? While a child may learn some core recognition language skills, it's not until the ages of 7 to 8 that they learn structure in language. How do they manage when there is no instruction at all? There is an early learning or critical learning period, but that's not the only reason kids learn. The biggest reason why kids learn is because the trail they follow is almost diametrically opposite to what we do as adults. You're curious now, aren't you? Well, stay with me. We're going to cover 3 reasons why adults struggle so much when learning a language. Reason number 1, reading instead of hearing or listening. Reason number 2, an absence of randomness. Reason number 3, the curse of vocabulary. Let's start with reason number 1, which is reading instead of hearing. How do you say the word croissant in French? If you heard it as a child, you'd express it differently. But when you read the word in English, it seems to read like croissant or croissant or croissant, something like that. And most of us make this mistake because we're reading the word in English or we're reading it in our native language, and then we decide to fudge our way forward. It's the same reason why a non-English speaker might trip over words like enough, receipt, or island, which, when you read it, sounds like eno, ug, or receipt, or Island. Kids, as you may have noticed, are pretty hopeless at reading. From the time you're born, or possibly even before, a substantial part of your pattern recognition is devoted solely to hearing, and of course seeing, but hearing. You can't figure out what's being said because you have no context, but you keep listening. People around you keep chattering, and a pattern seems to develop in your very young brain. Adults, on the other hand, seem to use reading as their primary source of learning. They can work their way through the written word if it's a language like Spanish or Italian. If it's completely alien like Malayalam or Mandarin, they may resort to learning the structure of the written word so that they can make sense of it. However, in most cases, reading becomes the first crutch. Unfortunately, when you read, you are prone to make mistakes based on your text interpretation. On the other hand, when you listen to something, you have no idea how it is written. I've covered about 60 hours of French learning so far, and one of the sentences that I've learned to say is, "Things will get better." In French, you could say it as "Les choses vont s'arranger." Or let's take another sentence that when spoken sounds similar. It's "Tout se passera bien." Now, if you read that in English or whichever language you speak, you will almost certainly end up with an inaccurate pronunciation. Yet if you simply listen to the sentence, you will always do a lot better. It may take a few tries, but you'll be understood and you'll be more likely to be 100% accurate after a while. Children seem to learn exclusively through sound. Adults, on the other hand, are given words. The written language is dumped upon them. That leads them to make pronunciation mistakes in many languages. If they're referring to the Japanese rice wine, they may incorrectly say sake instead of sake. If they were to switch to French, they most certainly don't hear the French R sound, which is produced at the back of the throat. This ends up with an incorrect rendition of croissant. We may say something like croissant or croissant when the French say it completely differently. The first correction that we might need to make is to listen to the language rather than to read it, just like kids do. This means that even if it is visible in your learning program, you need to close your eyes to get the right sound. You need to play it in the car while you're driving so you can't see the words. When you're walking, it just sounds like a podcast that you're listening to instead of something that you're reading, like a transcript. With that first shift in your strategy, you will find that you are hearing everything just like kids do. And granted, the person that's speaking it might have their pronunciation completely wrong, but there is a good chance if you're learning a language from someone else that they're speaking correctly. And so you will listen rather than read. Once you get out of the reading mode and into the listening mode, that's when you'll be a kid again. But that's not the only way. That's only the first shift in your strategy. So let's move to the second point, namely chaos. Okay, not chaos, but at least some sort of randomness. Because most language situations, they try to make things neat for you. They put you in a location. You're at a cafe, you're ordering a set of drinks and croissants. Almost all of the vocabulary, all of the structure is based on some logical sequence, sitting at a specific place, doing something that follows one after the other. Kids don't have the luxury of this logic. Let's explore why this is the case and how randomness helps us a lot. This takes us to the second part, the beauty of randomness in language learning. A child's first word is sudden and magical. Around the age of 8 or 9 months, a child may say dada, mama, or ball. Yet long before they speak, they have been inundated with as many as 20,000 to 30,000 sentences. Most of these sentences are random in nature. The sentences might be, "Where's the birdie? Are you hungry? Let's get your favorite toy." Notice how disconnected those sentences happen to be? It's not some tidy situation with logic. In fact, most of our daily conversations bounce madly in the same manner. 1 minute we're talking about which soup we prefer, then we swing wildly to the weather, only to talk about how the windows need cleaning. Those tens of thousands of sentences that a child hears have very little connection with each other. Taxes, table tennis, biryani, sheep, carpet cleaning. There are hundreds of weird topics that seem to clash with each other. At first it makes no sense, and for the child it's similar. All of those sounds are like a song playing in the background. Sometimes they have context and other times nothing at all. Randomness isn't as terrible as it seems. When you're learning a language, the sentences that you encounter need to be quite different from each other. not just in terms of context, but also they need to jump through the present, future, and past tenses as though it's perfectly normal to do so. Why? Because that is what normal is all about. As I was sitting down making the notes for this podcast, my wife Renuka, who was reading a book, turned to me and said, "Hey, look at this page. It says vegetable soup and it has chicken broth in it." Then she went quiet and followed it up with, "Hey, do you want to eat at 6:30 tonight?" She followed it up with, "We just got the plumbing bill and it's $340 just to fix the tap." So tenses, sentences, context, they're all fluid. They're not in the regular present or past, or it's just jumping around like crazy. The sentences are crazy, the context is crazy, the tenses are crazy. Everything is bouncing around, and that's what a child listens to all the time. Your learning app or learning program doesn't have the same emphasis on randomness, and yet every child on the planet, without exception, faces an avalanche of topics on a daily basis. The brain doesn't seem to worry about randomness. Instead, it seems to build a database of different situations, tenses, and whatever other stuff is involved in language learning. As an adult, this is very frustrating, very disconcerting, because there doesn't seem to be any order or structure. It just seems plainly unnatural. When I first learned how to speak Spanish, I knew perfectly well how to buy a ticket, get on a train, ask for a window seat. But if I needed some food, I just have to make weird noises and point because I might have never been exposed to randomness. A child, however, has almost all the variety it needs. And there's one more thing. No child has to deal with single words of vocabulary. We learn individual words like hola, amor, casa, familia, feliz, gracias, or anticonstitucionalmente. Just word after word. And let's find out, and we'll do this in the next episode, we'll find out why learning mountains of vocabulary can make you feel brilliant but hopeless when conversing in a language. And with that, let's do a quick summary. We covered two reasons. The first reason why we struggle so much with languages is because we are trying to read instead of hearing the language, instead of listening to what's being said. Instead of something playing in the background like a song that we just pick up, we try to force our way into reading, which is plainly unnatural because as kids, we don't learn how to read until much later, 4 or 5, even later. Reading is based on our own interpretation of how the word is written, our own language, our own context, which ends us with us saying something like "Donde está su carro?" instead of "Donde está su carro?" They're exactly the same words on paper, but they sound so different when you listen to them. The second reason why we struggle is because we're always put in this cafe, ordering stuff, getting on a train, all this boring stuff. And in reality, we don't speak like that. Our conversation bounces from soup to windows to garbage, and all the tenses mix up. Not mix up, but they move fluidly from one tense to the other. We go from the past to the present to the future to whatever language people call conditional. We don't know all of that when we're learning. We just go with the flow based on what we're hearing, and it's bouncing randomly. And you need a method like that, not something logical that fits in a nice little box like adults love to have. Kids don't have that advantage, and yet that's the reason why they learn without any books in grammar or vocabulary and stuff. And we will go to vocabulary next. But for now, let's find out what's happening in psychotactics land. of us would have bought an app that helps us to do things. So you can call it a to-do app. And then somewhere down the line, we'll look at another one and a third one and a fourth one. And we have no clue what makes one to-do app different from the other. And this is a factor of uniqueness. Today, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of competitors in your same category, whether you're selling services or products. And you might say, yeah, I'm different, but if you can't get that message across and clients can't feed that back to you, then you don't have a point of difference. This means that you have to charge less, you have to work harder, you have to do things that you don't necessarily need to do. And you can change the way you present yourself, but also the way you structure whatever it is you're selling, whatever it is that you are teaching. Your whole strategy changes based on your uniqueness. To find out more about it, go to psychotactics.com/U, that's U for umbrella, goodies. And you'll get some goodies and you'll start to understand why every single product that you sell needs to have a uniqueness. Just like an iPhone 14 is different from an iPhone 12, which is different from an iPhone 15. And every single one of those that come from the same company has to be sold as a unique product. Your products, your services, they're going to need the same treatment. So go to psychotactics.com/U goodies and learn how you can create that uniqueness for every single product. Because without it, it's a nightmare. You just say, well, my company is unique and no one cares about your company. You don't care about Apple, do you? You only care about the product that you're buying, the service that you're buying. So go to that link, and if you need to, email me and I'll send you the link. The second thing that we're doing is we're having a meetup in Paris, and we're also having a strategy workshop. For the strategy workshop, there are just 2 seats left. It's 3 days, and you're going to go through strategy that will change the way you look at the years to come. So if you want more information on that, email me at Sean@Psychotactics. The meetup's lots of fun. It's officially 3 hours. It could be 5 hours. It could be longer. You stay as long as you need to. And I can assure you that a day spent away from the office, or even a couple of days, yes, you're going to have to spend some time and money, but it will slightly change the way you think and the way you look at the world. Plus, it is good to get away from work from time to time and just let your thoughts wander. So come to the meetup or the workshop, and we'll see you in Paris, France. Bye for now. Still listening? India, as you know, is a pretty diverse country. It has about 22 main languages, about 1,600 dialects, and of course there's no language such as Indian, which means that almost everybody on the street can speak at least 3 different languages. Anybody, from the sweeper to the CEO, almost anyone can do that. And the reason for that is that they grow up hearing it. When I grew up, I was playing cricket with friends who spoke Gujarati. And then after that, I had someone who worked for us who spoke Marathi. My parents spoke Konkani, and I learned English both at home and in school. But this story is not about me. This is about my wife, Renuka. So she grew up a bit in Singapore and then in Kuwait. And it was only when she was in her late teens that she got to India and encountered Hindi for the first time. If you run some kind of conversation past her, she understands it. But she has never learned the language. So all of her learning as a teenager has been through listening. Now, admittedly, you don't get the depth of language. So if I just throw a word like her, which is a word like shabd in Hindi, which means word, she wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But in general, she can understand and be understood. And this is all through listening to the language, which is not what some of us tend to do. So now you know how you can change the way you go about things, at least a little bit. Bring some more hearing and listening into your life. And I think you'll find that language learning is a lot better and more fun than it's been so far. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye, and see you in 5000 BC.